Good evening, I'm Adrienne Arsenault. Tonight, is Ottawa doing enough to free Canadians detained in China? Michael Kovrig's family speaks out.
I would like to see my son again.
Kovrig's father and sisters say the government has options and they have the legal advice to back that up.
Do the right thing. This is about people's lives, not politics.
A broadcast exclusive.
I'm Andrew Chang. Also tonight, is physical distancing placing us too far apart?
I feel like 1 meter is fine.
From 2 meters to 1. Why some countries are moving people closer together.
Walmart under fire.
You gotta be kidding me. This can't be happening.
Selling clothes, declaring all lives matter, and more.
And BC's COVID success.
Part of it was people really embracing what we needed to do and doing it together.
What other provinces could learn from its flattened curve. This is The National.
The family of Michael Kovrig wants Ottawa to do everything it can to free 2 detained Canadians from Chinese custody.
They say it's within the government's power to act immediately, and several prominent legal experts agree.
Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor have been held by China for nearly a year and a half. Retaliation, it's believed, for Canada's arrest of Huawei CFO Meng Wanzhou at Washington's request. The Trudeau government insists it will not intervene in Meng's extradition case, but after obtaining a high-profile legal opinion arguing Ottawa can step in at any moment, Kovrig's family says it is time to talk about using that power. In my conversation last night with Michael Kovrig's wife, Veena Najibullah, we learned a lot about his confinement, her battle to free him, and the heavy emotional toll for both. Well, tonight, in another broadcast exclusive, Kovrig's father and sister also share their pain, their frustration, and a sense of urgency for the government to step in. In an era of the coronavirus, this is the Kovrig family bubble. There's Veena, Michael Kovrig's wife, his sister Ariana, his father Bennett. Unseen, unheard for Kovrig's entire detention until now.
I would like to see my son again.
The strain of it, the silence, the time apart, it's all raw.
Sorry.
Bennett Kovrig's fragile health is the reason the family got one brief phone call back in March. Held back from talking to or about Michael for a crushing amount of time has a cost.
To put it bluntly, we kept our mouths shut in the public for a year and a half. So I think that, we have reached the end of the road in playing, the be quiet and everything will be all right game.
The attention from the government, they say, has been kind and personal, but the words seem to have no weight.
It gets to a point where rhetoric can only get us so far, and I'm scared I'm never going to see my brother again, and I don't know why those in power are so scared of doing the right thing.
And the right thing, in their view, is to look again at legal options. Is there anything the government can do now to stop the extradition process of Meng Wanzhou, which could be the key to freedom for Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig?
It is an unreviewable discretion.
The family asked lawyer Brian Greenspan to examine the Extradition Act. He says a 1999 change in the Act means the Justice Minister can legally step in and still preserve judicial independence.
The minister has the right to withdraw the authority to proceed and to end the extradition proceeding, and it's totally at the discretion of the Minister of Justice.
The Canadian government, though, continues to say it won't get involved.
We in Canada are used to and proud of the independence and the integrity and the respect for our judicial system, and will continue to do that.
Has the government misinterpreted the law until this point?
I think that they've ignored the appropriate interpretation.
Let's stop saying we can't when, according to the law, according to the Extradition Act, according to legal opinions offered by very bright legal experts, we can.
Veena Najibullah sought the legal opinion, presented it to the government weeks ago, and didn't get a reply. But the Office of the Justice Minister and Attorney General released a statement to CBC News today, in part saying, we're well aware of the laws and processes, and it would not be appropriate to comment further.
I think it should have been stopped earlier. And
Former Supreme Court Justice Louise Arbour says she believes not only could Canada stop Meng's extradition, it should, and should have done so a long time ago.
Is it in Canada's national interest, including the protection of the security and life of 2 Canadians? I would say this has to stop.
But I can see there are people who would make the argument that this would sound an awful lot like negotiating with hostage takers, and there might be targets on the backs of other Canadians in China.
That's true. That's one of the arguments. Unfortunately, we never really reached that level of conversation or thinking because we were told by the government from the outset, we don't even go there. The matter is before the courts, deference to judicial independence in this country. We can't do anything. This is not correct. We can.
For the sake of the 2 Michaels, just have the conversation is the plea. And maybe angering the Americans is not a risk Canada is willing to take. But the family asks, just talk it out.
Do the right thing. This is about people's lives, not politics. There are things that can be done that don't take people away from their family and their lives.
And China lashed out at the United States and Canada again today for calling the detention of the 2 Michaels politically motivated while defending the arrest of Meng Wanzhou as a rule of law issue.
This is double standards. It really makes us wonder how low they can go.
China also dismisses yesterday's statement from Washington that accused Beijing of arbitrarily detaining the 2 Michaels and went on to join Canada's call for their immediate release. As for Meng, her next extradition hearing is set for August 17th at BC Supreme Court. Legal proceedings are expected to run well into next year.
Let's turn now to the COVID situation here in Canada. The death of a child under 10 is being linked to the coronavirus in Toronto, but public health officials stress the young girl died with COVID-19, not as a result of it. Ontario, meanwhile, still reporting the highest number of cases daily, back above 200 today, but with nearly 200 recoveries as well. In Quebec, the new recoveries far outnumber the new cases across the country. Only 322 new cases were reported in all. Now, the downward trend has some people wondering about easing physical distancing guidelines, but not just who you see, but the actual distance between you, and whether Canada should reconsider the 2-meter rule. Vicatopia brings us the latest science.
For Canadians, the 2-meter rule is now a way of life. But are we ready to get a bit closer?
I feel like 1 meter is fine as long as everyone sticks to like their core groups and don't like stray too far away from that.
I do think we are going to have it coming back for a second time, so I still think we should be cautious.
Is it safe to go to the pub?
Boris Johnson sounds sure as England's long national hibernation comes to an end on July 4th.
We will also reopen restaurants and pubs.
Hallelujah. As the daily case counts come down, so will physical distancing.
We will advise people to keep a social distance of 1 meter plus.
Plus, all the usual precautions such as masks and plastic barriers. 1 meter does significantly reduce the risk, according to a recent review of the best available research for the World Health Organization. It found the chances of getting infected by the coronavirus less than a meter away is about 13%, but a meter away, it's 3%. Even lower for 2 meters, but the data is not conclusive. Then there are other variables.
Environmental factors such as how well is it ventilated? Are you inside? Are you outside? What are people wearing in terms of personal protective equipment? These all can vary and change the risk.
Can't touch this.
As this Toronto man goes to great pains to show, 2 meters distance isn't easy on our streets. But the risks of getting closer are still too high for Canada's chief public health officer.
The bottom line is that, 1 meter catches a whole bunch of droplets. 2 meters, there will be more droplets that you may be able to avoid.
The experiences of other countries have shown whenever restrictions are loosened, whatever they are, people drop their guard. A resurgence in cases often follows. Vicatopia, CBC News, Toronto.
One of the most trusted faces in the American fight against COVID-19, Anthony Fauci, testified before Congress in Washington today.
Right now, the next couple of weeks are going to be critical.
Fauci addressed the surge of new cases in the United States, calling it disturbing, but looming large over his testimony, Donald Trump's recent comments on testing.
When you do testing to that extent, you're going to find more people, you're going to find more cases.
So I said to my people, slow the testing down, please.
According to Trump advisors, he was just kidding. According to Trump himself,
I don't kid. Let me just tell you, let me make it clear. Testing is a double-edged sword.
Despite that, Fauci confirmed today.
To my knowledge, none of us have ever been told to slow down on testing. That just is a fact. In fact, we will be doing more testing.
Comforting for those who feared Trump was undermining a critical pillar of any pandemic response. Donald Trump took his first trip of 2020 to the U.S.-Mexico border after announcing fresh immigration restrictions, including a freeze on visas used by skilled workers, especially those in the tech industry. Stephen D'Souza tells us that has Canadians worried.
Under pressure, poles sagging, Donald Trump went to a place he feels comfortable, showing off the border wall and making the case for keeping foreign workers out of the U.S.
So we want to give jobs to Americans right now.
On Monday, the administration extended a ban on green cards and temporarily froze some new work visas. Among the categories targeted, H-1Bs, the coveted visa used by Silicon Valley to attract foreign talent. The administration says the goal is to open up more than 500,000 jobs for Americans, but it may be Canadians caught in the crossfire.
People are very nervous. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of questions that are coming out.
Immigration lawyers are scrambling, trying to figure out if Canadians may be exempt.
I tend to tell clients that we should take a wait-and-see approach. They're going to issue guidance, and when they issue guidance, we'll have to adjust our plans accordingly.
Our interpretation is that Canadians do not fall under it. We're concerned that the Trump administration will take another viewpoint and will try to argue that Canadians do fall under it in some way.
For some Canadians, the visa freeze is a gift. Irfan Raji helps tech workers having issues immigrating to the U.S. He settles them in Canada, where they work locally or remotely for American companies.
So long as Canada can use this opportunity and other opportunities to attract and retain the best labor from around the world, it will absolutely help us economically, both short-term and long-term.
Canada's tech sector has already seen record growth in recent years, in part due to U.S. immigration turmoil.
Any other questions?
A trend many see continuing if barriers in the U.S. keep going up. Stephen D'Souza, CBC News, New York.
The pandemic forced Canada to stop most traffic coming across the U.S. border, but there is pressure to get things moving. Evan Dyer looks at how the government has managed the border and what it might take to reopen.
Canadians think that we can stop this at the border.
That was one of the last times the Trudeau government would insist border closures don't work. 3 days later, the flights stopped, as growing evidence proved Canada was wrong.
The time is the most important variable in this, yeah.
This researcher helped advise the Australian government to close on February 1st. Her subsequent analysis found it reduced Australia's early caseload by 86%.
We prevented, a much bigger epidemic. Just closing to China at the moment was the best things we could do.
Canada's COVID death rate is more than 50 times Australia's, but Canada has some issues Australia doesn't. Of course, Canada has a land border, and its closure is not complete. In April, more than 10,000 people a day were still crossing over. Canadians living in the U.S. would like to visit family here, but quarantine requirements make it impractical.
I haven't been able to see them in months. My grandson has learned to ride a bike. One of my granddaughters has learned to walk, and the other granddaughter has learned to crawl. And they've done all of that without me being there.
Epidemiologists say the border makes Canada vulnerable. People are still free to travel between Alaska and the lower 48, potentially threatening Canada's efforts to keep COVID out of the north. And while the curve is bending down in Canada, the U.S. is trending back up again.
Stronger efforts to, for example, test truckers. They've apparently, anecdotally, have been a group that's been relatively hard hit.
We are going to be very, very careful about when and how we start reopening international borders.
The government is still nowhere near being able to test the 6,000 people that enter Canada on an average day. In normal times, the flow of people is about 250,000 and would require far more daily tests than Canada has yet been able to carry out within its borders. That's how far Canada is from being able to reopen safely. Evan Dyer, CBC News, Chelsea, Quebec.
Well, the FBI now says NASCAR driver Bubba Wallace was not the target of a hate crime. Their investigation said the noose found in his garage on Sunday may have been there since last October. It was a garage door pull rope. Wallace is the only black driver at NASCAR's top level and a leading voice behind the sport's push for racial equality. One of the officers involved in the fatal shooting of Breonna Taylor has been fired tonight. Taylor was shot 8 times by officers who entered her home in Kentucky. The 2 other officers involved remain reassigned. Retail giant Walmart is facing outrage over certain T-shirts and other products available through its website, featured right beside Black Lives Matter apparel. Jacqueline Hansen looks into it.
Police Lives Matter bumper stickers, Blue Lives Matter booty shorts, and onesies for babies. T-shirts declaring homeless lives, Irish lives, red, animal, and all lives matter, all for sale by third-party sellers on walmart.ca.
You gotta be kidding me. This can't be happening. Maybe this is a mistake.
Sharon Rochester was shopping online for T-shirts for her and her husband, but ended up on Facebook, calling out Walmart.
I was disgusted. This is not something a company should be profiting off of.
But Walmart has been selling some of the items since at least 2016. That's when police in the U.S. complained a T-shirt was stoking racial division. The company removed that one, but not the others.
Walmart, all major brands, they're in a tough spot right now because they know they have to respond to the tone and the tenor, right, of our times.
Walmart says it stands against any form of racism or discrimination, and that it will continue to review items on its third-party marketplace to make sure they comply with the company's terms and conditions.
The more recognized you are as a brand, the harder it is to change. Because then they'll have a whole segment of the population where they'll feel like, oh, they're just caving in to the pressure.
Amazon is also under fire for selling a Blue Lives Murder T-shirt. A petition to remove it has more than 40,000 signatures.
The notion of Black Lives Matter is life and death for the Black community. I feel sad, then angry, and then I go into action.
The Dean of Design at a Canadian university teaches her advertising students to consider this.
Yes, we have a wide range of customers, but who is the most vulnerable? Who is the one who is most likely to be hurt by these messages?
It's a lesson she suggests all companies also consider. Jacqueline Hansen, CBC News, Toronto.
Ontario has fired the director of the Peel District School Board after mounting concerns about systemic and anti-Black racism. Reports say administrators weren't dealing with racism and that a disproportionate number of Black students were being suspended and steered away from university-level courses. A supervisor has been appointed. And Ontario is not waiting for the COVID-19 pandemic to end before making some big educational changes. The province unveiled its new Back to Basics elementary math curriculum today. Deanna Sumanek-Johnson looks at the challenges that presents.
After a school year that was anything but ordinary, this might be the one change Heidi Clapham welcomes for her son Brady. The new math curriculum for kids in Ontario, which will roll out in September.
Super happy. My husband and I have spoken for years about the necessity for math to go back to basics. Well, the basic math that we learned when we were growing up is what worked. Math has been sliding ever since.
Half of our students were not meeting the provincial math standards.
Ontario's plan to get its kids back on track with math includes return to basic math concepts and skills, including memorizing addition, subtraction, and multiplication tables, but also financial literacy and coding and computer programming taught as early as in grade 1. But this math tutor gives the new curriculum a middling grade.
Do I think it's important to teach basics? Yes. Do I think mental math is important? Absolutely. Do I think math facts are important? Of course, but we cannot go backwards. We must go forwards, and we need a new approach to teach kids.
But the biggest criticism of the curriculum is not focused on its content, but its timing. Ontario teachers already have to prepare for a combination of in-class and online learning.
When you think about what we've been going through in education, parents, educators, and students over the last 4 months or so, and where we're headed in September, I can't think of a worse time to be implementing something as important as new math curriculum.
Clapham says she also worries teachers will have too much on their plate, but she's happy the change is happening.
Since we're in a state of chaos at the moment anyway, part of my logic also is that maybe you deal with all of the disasters at once.
A continuation of a steep learning curve for the students, teachers, and parents. Deanna Sumanak-Johnson, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, Edmonton wants to be one of 2 hub cities that host the NHL playoffs, and Alberta is pushing hard for that to happen. But some say this video promoting Edmonton doesn't contain enough, well, Edmonton.
BC started as a coronavirus hotspot, but quickly managed to slow the spread.
Part of it was timing, part of it was luck, part of it was people really embracing what we needed to do. And
what other provinces can learn from the BC experience.
And you have COVID questions, we have answers. Our doctor's here to talk about road trips and more. We're back in 2. As the sporting world moves towards relaunch, more athletes are testing positive for COVID. That now includes Novak Djokovic, one of the most famous tennis players in the world. And as Cameron McIntosh explains, his infection seems to highlight a clear example of what not to do during a pandemic.
So maybe it wasn't the tennis in the packed arena with the bro hugs. It could have been the pickup basketball. Or the after parties. Check out the moves on tennis #1 Novak Djokovic in the dark jacket, who 10 days ago said he wasn't all that worried about coronavirus.
We have different measures in Serbia than in United States, for example, or UK.
Now he's apologizing after he and 3 others who played in a series of exhibition matches he organized all tested positive, bringing scorn from other players.
Coronavirus doesn't care who we are or what we do. We need to respect it and respect the rules.
A cautionary tale in a sport trying to responsibly relaunch this summer, including a socially distant, fan-free Grand Slam in August, the U.S. Open. Canadian Bianca Andreescu is returning champ.
In some twisted way, it might actually help.
Canadian tennis writer Stephanie Miles calls it a wake-up call.
It's going to make all the other events, and then hopefully the actual real tournaments, take this as seriously as it deserves to be taken.
Financially, professional tennis needs the U.S. Open to stay in bounds. Canceling the Rogers Cup was a $17 million blow to Tennis Canada.
Well, it's very, very unfortunate, and not just for Novak. But
CEO Michael Downey says the Djokovic case is a reminder of what's at stake for the game.
I think it's going to raise eyebrows that the conditions that the USTA have agreed to make it safe are going to be taken very, very seriously.
So yeah, no more of this. Now, Djokovic says he's putting himself into quarantine, but he's also on record saying if there were a coronavirus vaccine, he likely wouldn't take it. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Well, the NHL says the 2020 season will be back, but it will be held in just 2 so-called hub cities yet to be named, which means, at least right now, the most coveted prize in hockey may not be the Stanley Cup, but rather being a city chosen to host the action. And as Rafi Boudjikanian shows us, the case made for Edmonton is raising eyebrows.
The video does show a little Edmonton, before it cuts away to beautiful scenes of places mostly in the Rockies, a 4-hour drive from the city. Edmontonians noticed.
I don't know about by helicopter, but yeah, by drive, 4 hours, it's not very accessible for day trips.
And I still think there's a lot of beauty here in this place that you could have advertised.
Twitter did what Twitter does, piling on the sarcasm with other obviously non-Edmonton sites.
Enjoy the atmosphere, because we're not sure how long it's going to last.
Mid-March was the last time the Oilers laced up, hours after the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a pandemic. The NHL announced an indefinite postponement.
Backhanders just wide of the net.
And then a short playoff season, asking for interested parties to pitch themselves as locations. Alberta's presenting Edmonton, but Vancouver and Toronto are also in the running for hub status, along with 7 American cities. So why show off Edmonton this way?
And there was nothing, which felt really, I don't know, embarrassing. Like they don't want to show the city.
This marketing expert says it also sends the wrong message during a pandemic.
Going to hang out in the mountains to see them for fun is not necessarily what we would consider to be essential travel.
The Alberta government expects hockey players to stay in so-called bubbles at hotels linked to the Rogers Arena, and road trips to the Rockies are not part of the plan. There's a price to pay for family members of NHL players if they do travel.
Well, if they were to leave, then the expectation would be that they would not go back inside that particular bubble until after play was complete.
The league will decide which cities get to play host in time for July. Rafi Bujikanian, CBC News, Edmonton.
Up next, what other provinces could learn from BC's handling of the coronavirus?
But first, Canadians mark a grim anniversary. The worst terror attack in Canada's history happened 35 years ago today. Air India Flight 182 was on its way from Montreal to Delhi, set to stop over in London, when a suitcase bomb planted by Canadian Sikh separatists tore it to pieces off the coast of Ireland.
Pieces of the airplane were scattered over a wide area, but there were no survivors.
329 passengers and crew were killed. 280 were Canadians. 86 were children.
It's as if it happened yesterday.
10 years ago, the Harper government made June 23rd the National Day of Remembrance for victims of terrorism, and it apologized.
The families of the victims were for years after treated with scant respect or consideration by agencies of the Government of Canada.
Memorials were established, including in Toronto and Vancouver.
It means a great deal as a brown woman in Vancouver to feel that connection of belonging to this iconic park.
And this year, the pandemic has forced people to go online to mark the anniversary.
Welcome back. BC public health officials reported just 13 new cases of COVID-19 today. That's a fraction of the 200 plus reported in Ontario. And it's one more indication of why BC has been singled out for praise in managing the pandemic. But how exactly did it get things so right? Briar Stewart breaks it down for us.
I shouldn't have been at high risk, and I got it. I got a severe case. So it could happen to anybody.
Kathy Novak had one of BC's early cases of COVID-19. During the first weekend of March, she was at a dental conference in Vancouver. 2 weeks later, she was on her way to the hospital.
So what was that like when you got in the back of the ambulance?
Well, the whole thing was really scary because, again, I thought there's really no cure for this. So at that point, I was feeling a bit hopeless that I don't know if I'm coming back home. Sorry. Or in what capacity? Like, is my brain going to be working, or, what's going to be? So that was scary.
A few hours after being admitted, her husband called to try and get an update. The 60-year-old was already in the ICU on a ventilator.
That was when the doctor told me if we'd waited any longer, even one more day, she might not have made it. Might not even have been able to get her on the ventilator. It was awful. You don't realize how much you miss someone until it actually happens, and you don't know if you're going to see them again.
That dental conference, attended by 15,000, was eventually connected to more than 80 cases and at least one death. But even before that was on public health's radar, BC appeared poised to be hit particularly hard by the global pandemic. Its airport is a hub for flights to and from Asia. And by late January, there were multiple outbreaks to the south in Washington state. COVID-19 arrived in BC soon after.
Late yesterday, we had our first case of a novel coronavirus.
BC recorded the first death in Canada after an outbreak at the Lynn Valley Care Centre in early March. It was what Dr. Bonnie Henry, the province's health officer, feared.
Excuse me. Just take a moment.
And it left her shaken.
I'm very concerned about, I went through SARS. I've been through Ebola. I've been through the pandemic in 2009. And I just know how stressful it is for our healthcare system, for my colleagues, and for families that are dealing with this.
But what has emerged is that BC's death rate is among the lowest when compared to many other large jurisdictions across North America and Western Europe. It's substantially less than Ontario and Quebec. And some health experts believe it's a combination of good fortune and sound decisions.
I think a lot of what we did early on was very helpful. Part of it was timing, part of it was luck, part of it was people really embracing what we needed to do and doing it together.
By timing, she means March break. Quebec had its holiday earlier, so people traveled and came back home. By the time schools were out in BC, provincial and federal health officials were already advising against international travel. At that point, BC was preparing for the worst. It was bringing in millions of pieces of PPE, including by chartered flights from China. The Vancouver Convention Centre was turned into an overflow hospital, but today it sits empty. Of all of the discussion around BC's handling of the pandemic, much of the focus has been on its management of long-term care facilities.
Initially, there was some fear experienced by the staff, by the residents and families there.
In the Vancouver area, Dr. Michael Schwant led the response team on the ground, beginning at the Lynn Valley Care Centre. He said at first they were testing care home residents who had typical COVID symptoms like fever and cough, but that changed.
By mid-March, we were looking for a very broad array of symptoms, testing for those, and in many cases finding cases who might have flown below the radar otherwise.
Still, in the weeks that followed, there were several new outbreaks at other homes. On March 27th, the government ordered staff to work at only one facility, but the move took time to implement. It was just last week that all of the nearly 9,000 workers who did shifts at multiple homes were assigned to a single site.
This is where clearly public health expertise was brought to bear in a way that it was not in Ontario.
Ontario didn't follow suit with its care homes until 3 weeks after BC first made its announcement. And Colin Furness, an infection control epidemiologist, says that's not the only difference.
If I could put us in a time machine and I could send Ontario back to early March, I would have an effective expert owning the podium and doing that communication. Good morning.
By that he means because while Premier Doug Ford handled the updates there in BC, it was Dr. Bonnie Henry. Furness believes her vast experience instilled credibility.
And this is a very sneaky virus.
But even though BC may have avoided the worst of it, Henry says it's still not time to take a breath. There are still active outbreaks in care homes and more than 165 people have died.
Is there anything that you would do differently?
Yeah, I think about that. I think we can never get it perfectly right, but it's really hard to think about looking back right now. We still have a lot of ways to go before we're out of this crisis.
I almost died.
Back on Vancouver Island, Kathy Novak is still recovering. She spent nearly 2 weeks on a ventilator and a month in the hospital.
I did a lot of reflecting and feeling lucky, to be alive.
She's still fatigued but has slowly been regaining her strength. The virus caused a bright red rash to break out over her body. It's gradually fading, but the anxiety isn't.
I'm still nervous about it. I'm nervous about people putting their guard down and being a little more careless. And because even though hopefully I'll never get it again, but there are other people that you could pass it on to. So that's still a danger.
She doesn't know if her husband ever got it, so even though health officials say they can now expand their bubble and have contact with more people, they're sticking as a party of two, which they're grateful for, considering how close they came to losing that. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Victoria.
As we head into summer, some are cautiously making some modified travel plans. So what can you expect if you're staying in a hotel?
And in just a moment, Dr. Isaac Bogosh is going to join us to answer some of your COVID-19 questions, including this one about playing cards. My bridge group has decided to get back to playing bridge in each other's homes. Am I being too careful not wanting to play at this time? His answer after this. Hey, welcome back. As the country continues to reopen in staggered stages, you have kept sending your questions in about COVID-19, so we are going to continue fielding them. Joining us to help us out, Dr. Isaac Bogosh, infectious diseases specialist. Hello, Dr. Bogosh. And we're going to get started here with a question we've actually gotten from a few different people. My bridge group has decided to get back to playing bridge in each other's homes. Am I being too careful not wanting to play at this time?
Certainly not. That's certainly we know that the more people gather together, there's the potential for transmitting this infection. It would be important to consider what province you're in and what are the rules for getting together, and especially the number of people that are allowed to congregate. The other thing to consider is it sounds like this is in an indoor environment, and this would be a great opportunity for people to wear masks as well, because we know that this infection can be transmitted more efficiently if people are in close proximity in an indoor environment. So that would be another consideration. But of course, if you're not comfortable with this, if you're not entirely sure that other people will be negative for this infection, stay home, and you can always postpone that for later on.
Are the playing cards a threat?
They would be less of a threat. We know, of course, touching the cards and then rubbing your eyes, nose, or mouth could certainly contribute to transmitting this infection. But certainly, I think this is something that can be done with great hand hygiene. I'd be concerned about shared food, because no one plays bridge without having some excellent food without having that in close reach. So I'd be more concerned about the shared food. So impeccable hand hygiene would be something to really be mindful of.
Okay, here's another question. Are bathroom breaks safe on a multi-hour car trip? So I guess public restrooms.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And we know these are going to be places where there's going to be lots of different people who are going to be using those facilities at any given time. And of course, you can't guarantee that all those surfaces are clean. So by all means, those facilities can be safely used, but wash your hands. Simple as that. You're going to do it anyways, but wash your hands afterward, and shouldn't be a problem at all.
How are you feeling generally about the pace of reopening and people thinking about bubbling with other friends, family, that sort of thing?
I think things are going okay so far. Certainly, when we look throughout the rest of the world, Canada's doing remarkably well. It took a lot of work to get here, and collectively, we've done the job. Now, the key thing here is maintenance, and do we have what it takes to sustain these very low rates of transmission in Canada? And if we do, and if we certainly quell any outbreaks as they emerge, I think we'll do okay. But the key thing is we've got to be able to maintain this. That can be tricky, because we're in for a bit of a long drive ahead.
Hey, Dr. Bogosh, always good to talk to you. Thanks so much.
Anytime.
And for all of you at home, keep sending those questions in. You can find us on Instagram at CBC The National, or just send us an email at covid@cbc.ca. Now, travel is one of those things lots of people are thinking about, looking forward to the day it's safe to do once again. And so whether it's abroad or right here within Canada, there is one component of your next vacation we thought we'd take a closer look at. The hotel experience has changed in a few key ways since the start of the pandemic. So what should you expect? Let's start with check-in. You'll probably have a lot less physical contact with the front desk. You announce yourself, you confirm your information, they give you the key card from a distance, then you head up to your room. High-touch surfaces are disinfected more frequently, ice machines, elevator buttons. Speaking of which, at this hotel, no riding with strangers, so expect to wait your turn. When you get to your room, the usual mainstays may or may not be there. Pens, magazines, throw pillows, even the minibar may be completely empty, or at a minimum, everything inside will have been sanitized before you arrive. But perhaps the biggest change for a lot of people is that nobody will come into your room to clean it during your stay. You can still request it, but they may actually find it easier just to move you to a clean room. Even with room service, expect staff to keep their distance.
We bring the tray to the room and we leave it in front of the room, and we call the guest and let them know that their room service tray has been delivered. So there is no contact between the guest and the employees.
For everything else, it's really going to depend on what part of the country you live in. Hotels have pools, they have restaurants, they have gyms, all of which are going to be governed by different rules and restrictions depending on the COVID-19 caseloads in those areas. So, happy travels, sleep tight.
Across the country, kids are graduating without the usual celebrations. Why the students from one school decided to hit aisle 9 dressed to the nines. We're back in a few minutes.
I'm Josh Block. Tomorrow on CBC's daily news podcast, Front Burner. In recent weeks, several Canadians struggling with their mental health have been shot and killed by police after authorities were called. How can this be stopped? Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
At a time of financial uncertainty for so many Canadians, BC condo owners say their fees have spiked, get this, up to 300% in some cases. The problem appears to stem from insurance costs. So, as Greg Rasmussen tells us, the province is now trying to fix what it calls an unhealthy system.
The location of this property,
The setting for this 540-unit condo complex is tranquil, but quotes for insurance are creating havoc.
From January 2018 to January 2020, our insurance costs went from under $300,000 to almost $900,000.
Most of that was tacked on to monthly fees, but owners also decided to dip into an emergency fund to soften the blow.
Many of them are really feeling the pinch. We've heard from some people who feel they have to sell because they're simply not in a position to absorb increases like that, especially if it's going to be ongoing.
A report commissioned by the BC government shows it's a widespread problem. It found insurance premiums have risen by about 40% in the province and 50% in Metro Vancouver. There's a complex web of issues driving the hikes. Coastal BC is expected to be hit at some point by a catastrophic earthquake, which could flatten many buildings. In the meantime, insurance companies say claims are getting more costly to fix, and many multi-unit buildings, known as stratas in BC, aren't being well maintained.
BC's strata regulations, they're a bit lax compared to other jurisdictions, and that's led to the failure for many stratas to adequately maintain and repair their properties.
Today, the BC government announced it's making changes, toughening up regulations on condo associations and banning some hidden commissions that have increased insurance costs.
This isn't a quick fix for the pressures that people are facing, so it is going to take some time to address the challenges in the market.
James is promising more action eventually, but admits a rollback in premiums for homeowners isn't likely. Greg Rasmussen, CBC News, Coquitlam, BC.
Next on The National, the grads get creative during COVID.
We turned a bad situation into a good one.
How one class celebrated prom while also giving back to their community. That's next in our moment.
Students across Canada are having to find creative ways to celebrate prom this year, and one BC class decided to spend their prom grocery shopping. The store opened just for the students, and instead of shopping for themselves, they bought groceries for a local food bank as a way to give back. It's our moment.
We had to think about COVID, and we thought we would cancel the party completely. That just seems so sad. And so we just racked our brains to figure out a way that the most kids could safely see each other. We thought, well, let's go shopping.
Country Grocer volunteered to do this, and then we're getting food for the food bank. Win-win.
The Safe Grad Committee would take the funds that they had raised for our party and donate some of that to the food bank and give each grad $15 to shop.
I think it's unique. It's fun. Better than probably what would have happened otherwise.
It's really great for Country Grocer to be able to, help us donate food to the food bank, but also for us to be able to give back to the community.
It's nice that we get something. Yeah, it's nice to get to see everybody.
Even though times are really hard, we still need to celebrate the good things.
Okay, so firstly, they look fantastic, and I kind of like their thinking where they said, if the store will open early for seniors, maybe it will stay open late for the teens.
Right. And the part of this that I find funny is that they were never without chaperones. That the parents and staff were inside as well, making sure they all stayed, 6 feet apart, no hanky-panky, no getting up to no good. But it sounds like they did a lot of good. That's The National for this Tuesday, June 23rd. Have a good night.
Good night.